Hi. In this episode, I am doing a walking back to the train journey from Moscow to Kiev, the capital city of Ukraine, and along with my local host, Comrade Thrivikramji. On the 19th of April, the entire Soviet Union was in a kind of a mission where all the citizens, able-bodied, joined together in cleaning up the immediate environment and the environment outside of the homes, offices, places of work, etc., etc. Like I said earlier, I was also part of this cleaning process, and in the PFU in Ordoniki, and by noon, the work was over, and Strode told me to be ready by 8 o'clock in my hotel, in the lobby. So I went back to my hotel in the Lomonovsky Street at the intersection of the Merchansky Street. And of course, on my way, I had got into a Stolovaya and had my lunch. Cold cuts, salads, kefir, and so on and so forth. And then I, continued my walk. I went to my room, took rest for a while, packed up everything that I might need immediately in Kiev, and then took rest. Around 7:45, I got dressed up and took my bag, locked up the room, entrusted the key to the reception counter, and waited for the taxi with the comrade Strode to arrive. Exactly at 8 o'clock, the car came. I hopped into the car, and then, we headed toward the Kievsky train station in Moscow. Well, we took the Merchansky Street, which is on the west side of the Leninsky Gori and the Moscow State University. It is not on the east side, as I had mentioned somewhere along in one of the episodes. And this street is a beautiful street, actually. Very lesser construction or major buildings, lot of vegetation, lot of trees, well manicured trees, well cared for trees. And the first thing that you come across after 10 minutes in the streets of drive is the government estates. They are all gated communities with a very tall compound wall, and with this kind of a security personnel at each gate, in front of each gate. And I believe that this government estate is probably the place where all these senior, most government functionaries working for the government agencies, obviously they are all party bosses, would be living. And then further down, and another 5 or 8 minutes, there is another place of interest called Mosfilm Institute. In other words, it is the Moscow Film Institute who are arranging the, all the cultural programs, film competitions, as well as training of people in various aspects of film, from acting to directing and, all those related stuff. And like the Pune Film Institute, probably Pune Film Institute was a copied or a copy of what is called the Mosfilm Institute at some point. And then in another 5 minutes or so, the car just pulled into the parking space of the Kievsky train station. In fact, Moscow has at least 4 different train stations in the periphery, along the periphery of the city. And for example, the Kievsky train station will receive and see off all the trains headed toward Europe, Eastern Europe, or westerly trains. Similarly, there is a northerly trains originating station, as well as southerly and as well as easterly. Anyway, so this train station is very big, with a very tall roof and arched roof actually. With something very much similar to the Madras Central Station in India, because only difference is between Madras Central or any Indian train station like Victoria Terminus and Kiev Ski Station will be very few people you see around. First of all, only people who want to travel, they go to the station, and it is not actually, that is the advantage of having a very small crowd, nationally as well as locally. And the train was ready, and our tickets were, what is called verified and whatever, and then we got into the train. And in other words, our program, in the sense, comrades Throd and me, our program was actually done in consultation with what is called the Intourist. Intourist is the agency of the government, Soviet system, who will arrange for the trip for the internal travel of all the Soviet citizens from one town to another town. Another interesting thing is, those days in 1986, or even prior to that, obviously, every citizen, every man, woman, and child had a passport, even for internal travel. Without the passport, you cannot travel from one town to another town in the same state, or from one state to another state. Well, this is for, of course, internal security reasons. And, that is what communism had. One of the things communism offered, because internal security is very important. There will be always a group of people who are not happy about what government does or what government system is all about. So I had my passport, so they had my passport. Once we got into the train, we had to show the passport to the train conductor also. And then, the trains were beautifully maintained, which is all the trains are the so-called broad gauge. But there is a little difference between the broad gauge in India and broad gauge in the Soviet Union, because their broad gauge is little wider than our broad gauge, couple of inches more. Anyway, then the coaches are built in German Democratic Republic, one of the countries in the Warsaw Pact, obviously, and because it is a German-built coach, it is sturdy, lightweight, and looks beautiful, and maintenance is also very good. And the floor of the train is, the coaches are carpeted, and there is piped-in music, and in every coach there are 36 berths and 36 seats. And the train had something like 20 coaches headed toward Bucharest. And the train on its way to Bucharest will have a stop in Kiev, and we will get off at Kiev. So then what happens? What else? We checked into our seats, or rather we were guided to our place by a lady. All the crew, in the coaches, they're all women. And in the same coach, I met an Indian, one Sardarji, young man, who is a member of the Indian Army, an officer, a major of the Indian Army, who was going over to Kiev, of course from Delhi only, via Moscow to Kiev. on some kind of a military training with the US and Soviet military. He is one of the many, so they were a team of something like 20-25 people, and this man had some friend in Moscow with who he had spent some time, and then later on went over to Kiev. He happened to be in our what is called our coach, not in our compartment. In our compartment, we were 2 men and 2 women. The women, chose to go. They had opted for the, even while reserving the ticket, opted for the upper berths. It was a very comfortable trip, and the train is air conditioned, and as soon as you get into the train, once you are seated, there is a welcome biscuit and coffee, tea. Food free, of course. It will be part of the ticket fare anyway. And in the morning also, the same kind of treat is afforded to you by the railways. And by about 9:30, we retired. We started sleeping. It was a very comfortable journey, and we got back to what is called the Kiev city, or the train station in Kiev, around 8:30 in the morning. And Comrade Struve told me that there were something like 4 or 5 stops in between Moscow and Kiev. These 4 stops, I never recognized these 4 stops, because this stoppage as well as restart was so smooth. Or maybe the insulation of the train, sound of insulation was probably the best. That is why you did not know, one does not know, the external sound of the rolling stock while taking off from a platform or coming to a grinding halt in a platform. Once we were in Kiev, one of the things we did was in the station itself, there was a Stalovaya where we walked into and had some breakfast. And breakfast is very, that day it was very simple, or most of the days it is only simple, and there is a pattern to it. The breakfast is like what is called a piece of starch, a ball made of starch, carbohydrate ball, core with a core of a single piece of meat, and it is all cooked in a large pressure cooker. You can see the part of the kitchen also. It is a see-through area. And we went in and we purchased what is called a breakfast coupon, and it's only 50 kopecks each. And then there is no service actually. Only some cleaners are there to wipe the table, clean. That's all. So we took the coupon and went to the counter, kitchen counter, and exchanged the coupons for 2 bowls of this, what is called soup, let us say, quote unquote soup. And of course there is a spoon also. It is given in a porcelain bowl. And we took it over to our seat. We just slowly enjoyed our what is called breakfast of whatever these carbohydrate balls with or flour ball with a piece of meat in the core. And then around 9:30 or 9:15, Struve had hailed a cab or a taxi, and this taxi took us over to our hotel. The hotel is called Libid, and I was check into the 4th floor, and Struve was in the 8th floor of the building. And it's a beautiful place, absolutely no doubt. The 4th floor and 8th floor views are beautiful. You can look around, through the large picture window of the hotel and see that part. From my room, my view is toward the south of the town. And most impressive things as far as I was concerned on that first window view was, church domes, gold-plated church domes, several of them. Later on, I discovered that I was told that other groups told me that there are at least 5 or 6 really old churches built in the 15th and 14th centuries, and even the town was founded in what is called like in the 11th or 12th century, and the person who founded Moscow, that man's tomb is in actually Kiev. Well, another interesting thing about Kiev is Kiev is a large city, and 2.5 million people population, that's all. Well, that is what makes a city large in Europe. unlike Kerala or Indian cities or Chinese cities for that matter. And if Moscow had a meandering river, the Moscow River, dividing the city into roughly northern and southern halves. In Kiev, there is a river Dnieper, Dnieper, which flows into the Black Sea, and it is actually dividing the city into an eastern half and a western half. That is the difference. And our hotel was in the western half. In other words, we were living on the right bank of the river. The hotel is on the right bank. The old city is on the east side, and the new city is on the west side, and it's a beautiful place. The Ukraine has what is called steppe topography, etc., etc. Okay, what about the river? The river also has several channel islands. It is not a meandering channel. It is actually kind of a braided channel, I would want to call it that way. And back to having said that, back to the hotel. And so they told me that we will stay in the hotel until 2 o'clock, and after 2 o'clock we will go for a visit to a local exhibition. In other words, in all the major Soviet cities, there used to be a permanent exhibition arena. In other words, what is called a progress exhibition, they call it. And we went over to, after around 2:30 or 3, we walked over to this progress exhibition, which was, of course, not very far from the Shevchenko State University of Kiev. There are 6 or 7 universities in Kiev, and Shevchenko is a poet, of the Esther century, and it is in honor of his name. This university is named Shevchenko University. There is a huge, larger than life-size statue of Mr. Shevchenko sitting in a seated position, looking over to a red building. That was the oldest building in the campus. Red painted building with several columns in the facade running through the 4 or 5 stories. And in the exhibition, in the Progress exhibition ground, we saw several things, industrial models of industry, models of farming, so many such things. And along with that, one of the items was what is called a power station, a nuclear power station. And there is, of course, a guide to tell us also if there is a need, what is it all about. And the nuclear power station is a large one. It is all our scale models. And this power station had 4 generators, 4, what is called smokestack like thing, or cooling towers, okay, if you want to call it that way, etc., etc. And it was all painted in white. That I distinctly remember. And we were told that this is a nuclear power station with 250 megawatt or 500 megawatt each capacity. power generators, nuclear power station. And this is located somewhere further northerly of the Kiev city, only 60 or 70 miles northerly of the center of Kiev. And the wastewater from the, what is called this power station, will be flowing into, is arranged to flow into the Dnieper River after cooling, etc., etc. So, well, that much about the power station and our visit to the Progress exhibition in Kiev. And I will come up with another episode of our experience, my experience in Kiev tomorrow, next time.